So self-inquiry is the most direct way that I found to recognize what's real, what's true about us. Not that our egoic sense of self is wrong or bad. It's just a secondary thing, and we're here to recognize what's primary, what's not going to change or leave. And to do that, we might have to think and investigate in a little different way to what we're used to. So if we're going to start right now, whatever room you're sitting in, if you want to follow along with me, I'd really encourage you to do so, because having a direct experience of what you are might make it clearer that it's not as difficult, perhaps not entirely the obstacles in our way that we think. So as you're sitting right now with your eyes open, if you notice that your senses are taking in objects, seeing objects, your eyes can see all of the things that are present in the room that you're sitting in, wherever that is, wherever time it is where you are. It's a universal experience that you can see objects in the room. And your ears are hearing these words as well, and your brain is giving them meaning, putting them together into a structure inside. And you can feel whatever contact your body is making with whatever it is that you're sitting on or lying on, whatever chair, or you may be able to feel your feet touching the floor. You can feel the air touching your skin on your face. All of that's happening effortlessly, isn't it, as you are just sitting there. There's no effort needed to see the forms, to perceive the shapes, the objects in the room that you are in. And then I'd like you to shift your attention now to the empty space that's present in the room. So in the room, there are objects present. In this room here, there's sofas, there's this chair, there's my body, all of that. But then there is also empty space in the room. And I want you to really just pay some attention to that empty space, just for a short while, because it's something that we overlook, the natural skill and talent that we have as human beings, already a faculty to perceive something which is already invisible, intangible. An empty space is like that, isn't it? And it's not just because there's no object present in that space, but if you look at how you know the space is there, how do you know that there's empty space in your room? Well, because your body could get up and walk through that empty space, because it's intangible. It's not a thing, is it? The empty space, I can put my hand right through it. Just like I can't put my hand through my other hand, but I can move it right through the empty space. So how do you know that that space is there? Have you ever really stopped to have a look at that? Again, just keeping our eyes open, not drifting into some deeper state if you can help it for now. Just to really look at how do I know that there's empty space? Do you have to think about it? Or do you just know that there is something here that is not a tangible object? You can recognize the difference between a tangible object like your body and a more subtle object like a thought, and something that isn't an object at all, like the empty space in the room. So you may not have thought about yourself this way before, but what are you really then if you can already perceive forms when you use your body and your senses? And then when you use some other faculty, you can perceive something that is formless, invisible and intangible already. And you're so used to doing that perhaps it's never really impacted you just what faculty you already have. If you can recognize that it's just as easy for you to perceive empty space something that has no definable quality at all for you to grasp a hold of it. You can't really think about it. Just notice the space in the room that you're sitting in right now. Notice it doesn't have any shape or color. It's not changing. It's not coming and going. It doesn't have any quality. It's not something you can grab a hold of. You've never seen it. It's never been visible ever. And yet you intuitively already instantly know it's there. You didn't have to think about if there was empty space in the room when I asked you to put your attention on it. You went straight to it. It's so natural that maybe it's never actually struck you the implications that you can already perceive form like this body, or the one that you're watching this in, and all the objects in the room and the subtle objects of emotions and thoughts, all of that going on in the inner world. And you can already perceive formlessness. So does that mean then that you might be something different than you have already seen? Most of us come to Satsang with this idea, as I did too, that I am a someone in this body trying to get to the formlessness. But we've just proved in 3 or 4 minutes that you can perceive form and formless effortlessly already, that you are not subject or limited to either of those categories. And that's no small thing to wrap. Your mind might be saying, well, yeah, but that's just empty space. But if you really grasp the importance of what you're recognizing, you know, people do 25, 30 years of meditation or yogic practices, or they spend a lifetime reading scriptures to be able to perceive formlessness, and yet you've just done it. Could it be something that is so natural to you that you've never really kind of recognized just how different that is? That effortlessly, when I asked you, you switched from recognizing forms and shapes to the formless, empty space that's here. And what if that empty space isn't really empty space? What if it's not at all what we thought it was? Our mind tends to, our egoic sense of self tends to put the objects in the room as more important, and the empty space to be insignificant, irrelevant, just a kind of necessary functionality. You know, they couldn't have built this house that I'm sitting in without the space for the house to appear in first. But if you really stop and look at the empty space that we're describing, doesn't it fit the categories of the self? It's colorless, shapeless, intangible. It's not moving, it's not growing, it's not wanting anything, it's not trying to wake up even, it's not suffering. What if the empty space in the room is what you are? What if the intelligence, the sentience that powers life is actually present in and as this space-like formlessness that's everywhere, all around you right now? What if you are that space in which your body is appearing and moving around in? What if your body is moving around inside you? What if everything is moving around inside you? What if the space in the room is the intelligence, something that we've perceived perhaps to be inert, unimportant, actually turns out to be the most important thing, because it can't be damaged, it can't be it can't come to an end, can it? If this house was to be destroyed right now, what would happen to the space it was sitting in? if I clear out all the objects in this room, would the space be any different? Maybe the space is something so important and yet so completely overlooked by all of us. The thing that's just obvious and been there all the time, effortlessly recognized by us. But we're looking for something perhaps extraordinary or amazing when we find it, and we say, I'll know when I've recognized myself because it'll be something amazing. But what if it's been here all the time? What if this space is the intelligence? What if it's alive and sentient? And when it comes through a human form, when it takes the shape of a human form, it's finally able to think about itself. And when it does that, it thinks that it's only present in the body. And it forgets its vast emptiness of everywhereness that it really, really is. How does that affect then how you begin to perceive yourself? What if form and formlessness are just two ways that you can show up? You're showing up as the empty space, and you're showing up as the house and the body and everything else. Are you limited then to either? Isn't it part of the fun of being a human being when the self appears as a human being, a formless awareness takes the shape of a human being, that it can come to have this exact understanding that I am not even limited by these two categories. I can be form, I can take a form, a shape made out of this sentience, but the form itself, the body, all of these objects have no inherent intelligence within them. It's the empty space, the pure formlessness that really is the sentience, and it takes the shape of a rock or a plant or an animal or a human being or a universe to try to understand itself. And if you're following on so far and you really want to take this a little bit further, let's take this a little bit further. Let's imagine for a second that all the objects disappeared, including your body, which is going to happen eventually. We may as well look at it right now. Has anything happened to you, the space? Has anything happened to you at all when the body has gone? Nothing at all can damage that formlessness, can it, that space? Because it wouldn't be able to recognize itself in that same way, because even though right now the empty space is recognizing itself, it almost needs the body and mind to contrast. It needs the contrast of something growing and changing and unfolding and aging and becoming to help it sort of step back and recognize its inherent nature that isn't becoming, it isn't growing, it isn't present somewhere, it's everywhere. Where does that space, that formlessness stop? We like to think that the space in this room stops in this room, and the space in the next room is different to the space in this room, but is that so? Is something with no tangible quality affected at all when a house is built inside it, or when a body is built inside it? This might be an unfamiliar way of looking at yourself, that you can right now, through the body that you're listening to this in, watching this, you can look through your eyes and see shapes and forms and objects. And then you can look and see the formless nothingness, no thingness that you also are. And that either of those are effortless. Can you be limited by anything then? Even when all the forms have disappeared, the space in which they appeared is still present, isn't it? It cannot disappear. The substrate, the formless nothingness that really is the intelligence that powers all of these shapes, these forms. Can it disappear? Can it go away? Can there ever not be the space? The universe can go, but the space in which it appeared, can that go? Ever? So what are you then? Does it not shift your perception from feeling like you're someone in a body trying to reach the great self, to recognizing maybe that I can appear as nothing at all, and then I can appear as someone and something? But neither of those really ultimately define me. I can take all of these shapes, or I can take no shape. And I'm not limited to either, that I am beyond even these categories of form and formless, tangible and intangible. Again, just recognizing the space, the formless space in the room. Is the room in the space, or is the space in the room? Or both of those? Or is neither of those really ultimately true? So what you end up with is a mystery. What you really find yourself to be is something indescribable that can really appear as all of this. And then the shapes that you're making will disappear, the forms will come and go constantly. But always, always is the formlessness in which they're arising. And you perceived it within 3 or 4 minutes tonight. And you just knew it was there. You didn't think about it with your mind. You didn't have to think, is there empty space in this room, did you? You just knew it when I pointed attention to it. It was a knowingness before thought. Mind may speak about it afterwards. Mind may try to think about, well, how did I know? All of that. But before your mind engaged, you knew the empty space was present. So perhaps you are something so much more amazing than you've recognized. Effortlessly perceiving forms. Look, when you look through your senses and your mind, you see a world of forms and shapes. And then when you switch your perception mode, you effortlessly recognize that formlessness that's here. And then to just gently rest between those worlds where you don't have to pick one or the other. You don't have to grab the formlessness and reject the forms, where maybe you even want to rest in the final place where you don't really see any difference between the two. I can show up this way or this way. The forms and the shapes are temporary and they change and they evolve. The formlessness is stable and unchanging and permanent. But either way, I can enjoy my formlessness and I can enjoy the form, the way that I'm appearing as this human being. I can enjoy the shape I've taken so that I can recognize my infinite nature. How far does the empty space go on for? How far does space go on for? What can bring to an end something that has no definable, tangible quality at all? Something like this house has a size and a shape. Your body has a size and a shape. It has edges. It's present in one place and it's not present in another place. When we think about ourselves as the formlessness, the empty space, how far do you reach in all directions from the body that you're listening to this in? Where do you stop? Can anything make you stop if you're not a tangible, if you're perceiving yourself in your formless aspect? What makes you come to an end? Will you ever run out of space? When you begin to think about yourself this way, where is that space absent from? Are the forms taking the, are they displacing the formlessness where my body is? Is there a lack of formlessness where my body is? Or could it be that they are the same thing? Could it be that there's just parts of you that are visible and tangible, and parts of you that are invisible and intangible? And why do you have to pick one or the other? You know, we all get on the pathway. We are sure at first that we're someone, we're a tangible thing that we can, a sense of self, and we're sure that that's the right one. And then we discover this other aspect of formless self, that we are fundamentally primary. And we're sure that that's the right one. And we reject the form, we reject the mind, we reject the egoic sense of self and the body. But what if that is to be embraced? Can we just embrace both ways that you can show up? One is temporary and changing and evolving, and the other is permanent and stable. And what happens when you don't try? You can try it out right now. Don't prefer form or formless, just enjoy both. It's possible to know with a deep conviction that you are the formless awareness that's ever present everywhere, present in every single atom, everywhere. And also to enjoy the temporary sense of being a human being, a someone. When you're not trying to pick one or the other, which is the last place our ego hangs on. It says form or formless, and it concludes that formless is better because it's permanent and we can't suffer as that. But doesn't the formlessness include all of this anyway, doesn't it? By its very nature, it's inclusive of all of the forms that are appearing in it. So we can just relax and know that we're really indefinable, even beyond the categories, the final categories of form and formless. Just here, sometimes I'm a form, sometimes I'm formless. Formlessness is always there. And sometimes I'm visible and tangible too. It's a very different way, isn't it, to perceive yourself. And it may meet with some resistance, as I've said before, because it's the end of the road when you really see this, end of the road for suffering. I can enjoy my temporary human aspect with no fear of it ending, because I am still right here as the space in which the body is arising. The intelligence is in the space, is the space. Never was the mind or the body that was intelligent. The shapes and the forms are beautiful, but they have no inherent power or intelligence without you, the formlessness. When you leave your body, it's no longer functioning without you, is it? It's considered to be gone. So I really hope that this has given you a different way to investigate, and maybe you'll come to see that self-inquiry, perhaps the way I do it is different to other ways you might have done it, but hopefully simpler and easier, that whether you have to listen to this again a few more times to really grasp the importance of the fact that you can already, without doing any warm-ups, without doing any meditation, without standing on your head or getting into a deep state, you immediately recognize that there's something present right now here, wherever you are, and everywhere. There's space, that which has no tangible quality. And that's going to push against what your mind says. Your mind says you're not worthy of waking up, but you just did it. You just saw exactly what you are. And the doubts that say, well, you're not going to be able to stay like this. It's all right in Satsang, what happens after? It's okay. Attention will wander back to forms, thought forms, won't it? And then at some point it'll wander back to the space. And then it might wander back to thoughts and doubts and questions and emotions coming up. And then at some point it'll wander back to the space. Is your fundamental nature changing in all of that? Does it make any difference at all to the formlessness, whether your mind, your attention has been totally fixated on the forms of thoughts or emotions or experiences? When you think about it, has anything happened to that space at all, even when your body appeared? Did it really come into the body, as we're led to this popular myth that I was born, I incarnated into this body? Or did the body just appear in me, powered by me? So I'd really, really like you to see that recognizing the self, the formlessness, is a lot easier than we perhaps may have believed. And once you recognize it to any degree, you really can't believe those doubts, that unworthiness, that voice that's saying, yes, but you're never really gonna get this 100%. You can't listen to it 100% again. And even if you do, has it really changed anything about you? Or has the space just been having this very vivid dream? It made this shape of a human being and was able to think about itself for the first time. And then it got kind of lost, caught up in paying attention to the thoughts. And for a long time, attention stayed there. But when you come to see, it's always been right here, hasn't it? Right here, unchanged, no matter what dream it was having. It dreamt for a long time that it was just the form only. But is anything really any different? I always would really like to make it simpler, to make it easier, to make it quicker, to recognize and to burst through the myths that really limit our awakening. And one of those is that it takes a long time to recognize the formlessness, that you've got to be ripe or ready or do lots of practice or something. And hopefully you've seen tonight that is just not true.